Today we start off with a new chapter, ecosystem. What is ecosystem? All living organisms need food and other materials from the surroundings. The life of an organism is affected by the living and non-living components around it. All living organisms in a given area that interact with each other as well as the non-living components of the environment such as air, water, soil, sunlight, constitute an ecosystem. That means within a particular area, the living and the non living things they interact with each other and they form the ecosystem. That means both the living and non living components of a particular area constitute the ecosystem. I already told you an ecosystem constitutes of both living and non-living components present in that particular area. So, an ecosystem has two main components, the biotic component and the abiotic component. The biotic component consists of all the living things present in that particular area, and the abiotic components constitute all the non living things present in that particular area, such as water, soil, air, minerals, light, that affect the biotic components. So, an ecosystem has two main components, biotic components and the abiotic components. We will be discussing about the biotic components. Biotic components constitute all the living organisms in an ecosystem, such as the plants, animals, and microorganisms. We know that all living organisms need energy to live. So, depending on how these living organisms obtain their food, living organisms or the biotic components can be divided into three main groups: producers, consumers, and decomposers. All living organisms need energy to survive. The ultimate source of energy on Earth is the solar energy. Only green plants have the ability to use the solar energy. Green plants can make their own food in the presence of sunlight using water, minerals, and carbon dioxide to produce food by the process of photosynthesis. Thus, green plants are called producers or autotrophs. So, the only the green plants are the producers because they can prepare their own food using solar energy by the process of photosynthesis. So, the green plants are the producers. Living organisms that cannot make their own food but depend on producers for food are called consumers or heterotrophs. So, living organisms that cannot prepare their own food but depend on the producers for food are known as consumers. All animals are consumers. They are further divided into herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Herbivores. Animals that eat green plants are called herbivores. Example: deer, horse, elephant. Carnivores. Animals that eat other living animals are called carnivores. For example, tiger, lion, leopard. Omnivores. Some animals eat both plants and other animals are called omnivores. For example, human beings, crow, bear, etc. Now, there are some carnivores that feed on dead animals. They are called scavengers. So, carnivores which feed on dead animals are called scavengers. Example hyena, vulture, jackal. There are some microscopic organisms that feed on dead and decaying organisms. They are called decomposers. Example bacteria, fungi. Decomposers break down the complex organic compounds present in the remains of dead plants and animals into simpler substances. They are very useful in releasing nutrients from dead, decaying organisms back into the environment. These nutrients are reused by plants. Thus, decomposers help in recycling of nutrients. We have already discussed about the different types of consumers. So, based on whether they are herbivores or carnivores, they are divided into primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. Herbivores, or those animals which feed on green plants or the producers, are known as primary consumers. So these animals are directly dependent on the producers for food. So they are known as primary consumers. Herbivores which eat producers are known as primary consumers. Those carnivores which eat the herbivores are known as secondary consumers. So, animals which eat the primary consumers are known as secondary consumers. They are not directly dependent on the producers for food. Instead, they eat the primary consumers. So, they are known as secondary consumers. Though they are not directly dependent on the producers for food, they are indirectly dependent on them because they are eating the primary consumers. And what do the primary consumers eat? They eat producers. So, how are the primary consumers getting energy from? The primary consumers are getting energy from the producers. Secondary consumers are getting energy from the primary consumers who have eaten the producers. Hence, they are known as secondary consumers. Top consumers or the tertiary consumers are those carnivores which eat the secondary consumers. So, let's discuss this again. Producers or the green plants prepare food. They are eaten by the primary consumers or the herbivores. The secondary consumers eat the herbivores, and the tertiary consumers eat the secondary consumers. For example, suppose a rabbit is a herbivore. We know that it eats the producers. Now, rabbit is eaten by, suppose, a snake. Okay, so snake becomes the secondary consumer. Now the snake is eaten by an eagle. So eagle becomes the tertiary or the top consumer. So rabbit is a herbivore, primary consumer. It was eaten by the snake. Snake is the secondary consumer, and snake was eaten by the eagle. So eagle becomes the top or the tertiary consumer. So how is the energy flow being passed? From the producer, it is going to the primary consumer, and from the primary consumer, the energy is going to the secondary consumer, and from the secondary consumer, the energy is being passed to the tertiary consumer. So we can draw an ecological pyramid using the different biotic components of the ecosystem. The producers will form the base of the pyramid, then the primary consumers, secondary consumers, and the apex is formed by the tertiary consumers. We do not include the decomposers in the ecological pyramid because they are found in all the levels, because decomposers feed on both dead and decaying plants and animals. So we do not include the decomposers in the ecological pyramid of the trophic levels. The producers form the base of the pyramid, hence, they form the first trophic level. Primary consumers form the second trophic level. Secondary consumers form the third trophic level, and the tertiary consumers constitute the fourth trophic level. So, as the level increases, the number increases. So, the base forms the first, then second, then third, and the apex forms the fourth trophic level. Why is a pyramid used to denote the different trophic levels and not any other shape? Because what happens is the shape of a pyramid is like that of a triangle. Now the base is more, and as we go up the apex, the size decreases, isn't it? Now this indicates the flow of energy also. Now producers, they get energy from the sun. Okay, and so from the sun the producers get maximum energy, and they utilize this energy to produce food by the process of photosynthesis. Okay, now when the primary consumers eat the producers, only some amount of energy is passed to them, because whatever energy was got by the producers through the solar energy was utilized during photosynthesis and other activities. So when the primary consumers feed on it, only some energy can be passed to them. Okay. Similarly, when the secondary consumers eat the primary consumers, only some energy is passed to them. Why? Because the primary consumers had utilized the energy they had got from the producers for various activities. So, whatever is left only is passed to the secondary consumers. Similarly, the energy passed to the tertiary consumers will be less. So, as we move up the trophic level, or as we move up the pyramid, what happens? The level of energy decreases. So, producers get maximum energy from the sun. Only some amount of that energy is passed to the primary consumers, and from that also only some is passed to the secondary consumers. So tertiary consumers will get minimum energy. Okay, so though primary consumers are directly dependent on producers for food, that is why they'll get maximum energy, whereas tertiary consumers, they are indirectly dependent on the producers for food, so they will get minimum energy. That is why use the pyramid shape. Okay, so the shape of the pyramid and the different trophic levels indicates the flow of energy, or the amount of energy that is being passed from one trophic level to another. This leads to a term known as food chain, a series of organisms that are linked to each other through a process of eating and being eaten form a food chain. A food chain shows the transfer of energy within an ecosystem. I already told you how energy transfers from the producers to the tertiary consumers. So, a food chain will show the transfer of energy within an ecosystem. So, let's see an example of a food chain. So, as I already told you, a food chain is a series of organisms that are linked to each other through the process of eating and being eaten. For example, see the picture given on the screen. The producer is eaten by the grasshopper. The grasshopper is eaten by the rat. The rat is eaten by the snake. The snake is eaten by the eagle. And then, as I told you, after the eagle dies, what happens? The microscopic organisms, or the decomposers, they break down the complex organic compounds and then into simpler substances, and it is released into the environment, and these nutrients are reused by plants. Thus the chain continues. So they are linked to the organisms, they are linked to each other, and this series is known as a food chain. Now we come to another term called food web. Several food chains are interconnected to form a food web. Now, a consumer can be eaten by many other organisms. Like, for example, a frog can eat a caterpillar as well as a grasshopper. A snake can eat a rabbit, it can eat a lizard, it can eat a rat. And a rat can also be eaten by a hawk or it can be eaten by an eagle. A lion can eat a goat directly or it can eat a fox. Okay, so it can eat a primary consumer or it can eat a secondary consumer. So, when many food chains are interconnected, they form a food web. Example given on the screen, the difference between a food chain and a food web. Food chain shows only one series of organism being eaten by another organism, whereas a food web is a interconnected food chain. Like a rabbit can eat grass, a carrot, the rabbit can be eaten directly by the eagle, or grasshopper eats the grasshopper can be eaten by the rat or a frog. Okay, then the rat can be eaten by the fox can be eaten by the eagle, the frog can be eaten by the snake, then they'll be eaten by the eagle. So when a series of food chains are interconnected, it is known as a food web. We can also draw another pyramid known as the pyramid of numbers. Now, the pyramid of number shows that the first trophic level, that is the producer, consists of maximum number of organisms. So as the trophic level increases, the number of organisms decreases. Like producers will have maximum number of organisms. Primary consumers will have fewer number of organisms. Then secondary consumers will be less and tertiary consumer will be less. Like see the picture given on the screen. See the producers, so many flowers are there. Then primary consumers less than the producers. Secondary consumers are fewer than the primary consumers and there is only one tertiary consumer. So this is known as pyramid of number. The pyramid of number shows that as the trophic level increases, the number of organisms decreases. The flow of energy from the producers to the consumers is always in one direction. We call it unidirectional flow of energy. Uni meaning one. So the flow of energy is from the solar energy to the producers, producers to the primary consumers, primary to secondary, and secondary to tertiary. It never goes backwards. It is always from the sun to the producers and then to the consumers. It can never flow from the consumers to the producers. Okay, so it is always unidirectional. Solar energy to the producers and from the producers to the consumers. And as I already told you, producers get maximum amount of energy, primary consumers get less, secondary get lesser than primary consumers, and tertiary consumers get minimum amount of energy. Thank you everyone. I hope you all understood what was discussed today. We discussed what is an ecosystem, the biotic component of the ecosystem, that are the producers, consumers, and decomposers. We did the different types of consumers, primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers, the different trophic levels they formed, the ecological pyramid, the pyramid of number. Then we did the food chain, the food web, and the unidirectional flow of energy. I hope everyone understood what was done today. Thank you.